She was sold like an animal, but he made her feel like a queen. Her family lived in a tiny mud house at the edge of the village, with cracks in the walls that let the cold wind seep in during winter. Her parents worked tirelessly, her father in the fields from sunrise to sunset, and her mother tending to the household and the small patch of land they could call their own. Money was always scarce, and food was often limited to whatever they could grow or buy with the little they earned. Despite all these hardships, her childhood had moments of laughter and warmth that would later become distant memories she clung to in the darkest times of her life. From an early age, she showed a gentle nature and a curious mind. She loved the small things, the sound of birds in the morning, the smell of wet earth after rain, and the laughter of children running through the fields. Her days were filled with chores, but she would always find time to play with other children in the village. They ran barefoot across dusty roads, climbed trees, and played simple games that required nothing but imagination. Those moments were her little escapes, moments where she felt free, safe, and like any other child in the world. Her parents tried to give her everything they could, though it was never enough. Her father would sometimes bring home a small piece of fruit or a few coins from the market, and her mother would save scraps to make a simple treat. They loved her deeply, but their love could not shield her from the harsh reality of the world around them. Poverty was a constant shadow, and with it came dangers they could not always protect her from. The village was full of people who lived as they could, scraping by, and not everyone had good intentions. Still, for now, she was happy, surrounded by the warmth of her family and the beauty of the simple life they shared. School was a small building at the edge of the village, with cracked walls and a roof that leaked when it rained. Despite the conditions, she loved to go there. Learning gave her a sense of hope, a promise that life could be more than struggle. She loved reading simple books, tracing letters in dusty notebooks, and listening to her teacher tell stories about distant places. School became her sanctuary, a place where she could dream of a life beyond the village, where she could imagine a future filled with possibilities. Her friends at school became like family, and together they would share stories, dreams, and secrets under the shade of the old trees near the playground. But life in the village was unpredictable. One day a man arrived, well-dressed and smiling in a way that seemed kind and trustworthy. He said he could help her family, offering work and money that seemed like a dream. Her parents were hesitant but desperate. They listened as he promised that she would get an education, clothes, and even a chance to see the city. They wanted the best for their daughter, and the thought of giving her a better life blinded them to the danger. They were ordinary people, not equipped to recognize the hidden cruelty that sometimes hides behind friendly faces. The girl was excited at first. She imagined herself walking through a big city, wearing clean clothes, learning new things, and helping her family with the money she would earn. The man spoke gently, telling her she was special, that she deserved better than the life she had. She believed him because, for the first time, someone spoke to her like she mattered. She packed her small bundle of belongings, hugged her parents tightly, and promised to write if she could. She felt proud to be trusted with this opportunity, unaware that her world was about to change forever. The journey away from the village was long and confusing. She traveled on crowded buses and dusty roads, clinging to the hope that everything the man promised would come true. At first, he continued to be kind, pointing out sights along the way and telling her stories about the city. She began to trust him, thinking she had found someone who genuinely wanted to help her. Her heart was filled with excitement and curiosity. She thought about all the things she would learn, the people she would meet, and the life she could have. She felt safe, believing that her parents' decision to trust him had been the right one. But slowly, things began to change. The man's demeanor shifted, small signs that she didn't understand at the time. The roads they traveled became more isolated, the conversations fewer, and the smiles rarer. He began to speak harshly sometimes, warning her not to speak to anyone, telling her that the world could be dangerous if she didn't listen. Confused and scared, she followed his instructions, hoping that this was just part of the journey and that soon she would reach the promised city and start her new life. Her hope was fragile, but it was all she had to hold on to. When they finally arrived at a place that was supposed to be her new home, she realized that nothing was as she expected. The building was dark and crowded, filled with people who looked frightened and sad. The air was heavy, and the sounds around her were not of laughter or learning, but of harsh voices and despair. She soon understood in the deepest part of her heart that she had been deceived. The life she had dreamed of was gone, replaced by a harsh reality she had never imagined. The man who had promised her safety and education had brought her into a world of fear and abuse. She was no longer a child with hopes. She was treated as someone without value, someone who had no control over her own life. In those first days, fear consumed her. She cried herself to sleep, thinking of her parents, her village, and the simple joys she had once taken for granted. Every sound, every shadow felt like a threat. She didn't understand why this was happening to her, why someone she trusted could betray her so completely. Her heart ached with longing for the life she had lost. Yet amidst the despair, a small spark of strength remained inside her. It was the memory of her parents, love, the laughter of her friends, the feeling of the sun on her face while playing in the fields. That spark became her anchor, the tiny light that reminded her that she could survive, that she could endure. Days turned into weeks, and each day brought new challenges. She was forced to follow strict rules, live in overcrowded spaces, and endure the cruel treatment of strangers who saw her only as an object to control. Yet, she learned to be careful, to hide her fear, and to find small ways to protect herself. She observed others, watched their behaviors, and slowly understood the rules of this harsh new world. Her mind became her shield, her thoughts a refuge where she could retreat from the reality around her. In that quiet inner world, she imagined herself back in her village, running through the fields, laughing with her friends, and feeling the love of her family. These memories gave her the strength to face each day, even when it seemed unbearable. Despite the fear and sadness, she noticed moments of kindness, however small. A glance that wasn't harsh, a word that wasn't cruel, or a brief moment of understanding from someone else who was suffering. These moments reminded her that humanity could exist even in the darkest places. She began to hold on to hope, fragile though it was. She promised herself that one day she would escape, that she would survive this, and that she would not let the cruelty of the world break her spirit completely. She learned to be patient, to wait for opportunities, and to trust her instincts, even when everything around her seemed unsafe. At night, when the world was quiet, she would think of her parents and the life she had lost. She imagined herself returning to the village, telling her story, and reclaiming the freedom that had been taken from her. She understood that her innocence had been stolen, but she also realized that her strength had not been. Each day, she grew more determined to endure, to survive, and to one day reclaim her life. Even in the darkest moments, that determination shone like a tiny flame, refusing to be extinguished. She began to notice the little things she could control. The way she held herself, the way she spoke, and the choices she could make, even if small. These tiny acts gave her a sense of power, a reminder that she was still human, still capable of feeling, thinking, and dreaming. Though the outside world treated her as less than human, she refused to let it take away her inner dignity. She learned to protect her mind and her heart, understanding that her spirit could remain free even when her body was trapped. As weeks turned into months, she began to observe the people around her, learning their behaviors, and quietly understanding the world she was trapped in. She saw the fear in their eyes, the way they moved cautiously, and the moments when they showed fleeting kindness to one another. These observations taught her valuable lessons about survival, patience, and resilience. She learned that hope could exist even in the darkest circumstances, and that strength often came from small, quiet acts of courage. In those first months, she discovered the power of her own mind. She began to imagine a life beyond the walls that confined her, a life where she was free, respected, and loved. Though it seemed impossible, the thought of that life became a guiding light. It reminded her that the world outside still existed, and that someday she could return to it. She understood that survival was not just about enduring pain, but also about holding on to the belief that a better future was possible. Though her childhood had been stolen, her spirit remained. She learned the harsh realities of life far too early, but she also learned the resilience that would carry her through the years to come. Every small act of courage, every memory of love, and every dream she held onto became part of her armor. She realized that while her body could be confined, her mind and heart could remain free. And in that freedom, she found the strength to face each day, to endure the cruelty around her, and to quietly hope for a life where she could once again feel safe, loved, and valued. The days that followed in her new world were filled with fear, confusion, and a constant struggle. To survive, every morning she woke to the sound of voices that were harsh and unkind, the clanging of doors, and the hurried footsteps of people moving about in a place that felt more like a prison than a home. The bright, hopeful journey she had imagined when she left her village had vanished. Instead, she found herself in a place where she had no freedom, no choice, and no one to turn to. The walls that surrounded her seemed to close in tighter each day, and yet, even in that darkness, she tried to hold onto the small spark of hope she had carried with her from home. Life in captivity was confusing and frightening. She was forced to follow strict rules that made no sense to her. Every action was monitored, and any mistake was met with harsh words or punishment. She could not speak freely, could not move as she wished, and even small moments of laughter or curiosity were discouraged. The adults around her treated her and others like objects, like things to be controlled rather than children with feelings. She had never experienced such harshness before. Even in her village, life had been hard, but it had been filled with love and small joys. Here, there was only fear. The people around her were also trapped in their own struggles. Some were older and had been in that place for many years, their spirits broken by years of hardship. Others were like her, young and scared, trying to understand a world that seemed cruel and unfair. She observed them closely, learning how to avoid trouble, how to stay unnoticed, and how to survive without drawing attention. Slowly, she began to understand that in this place, survival depended not only on strength, but also on caution, patience, and intelligence. Each day became a lesson in endurance and observation, a test of her growing resilience. Despite the fear and harsh treatment, she found moments that reminded her of her humanity. Sometimes, someone would smile gently or offer a small word of kindness. These moments were rare but precious, tiny lights in a world that was otherwise dark. They reminded her that even here, in a place of cruelty, human compassion could still exist. She clung to those moments, replaying them in her mind over and over, using them as a shield against the despair that threatened to consume her. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, became a symbol of hope and a reason to keep going. She also learned the importance of her inner world. Her mind became a refuge where she could escape the harshness of her reality. She remembered the fields of her village, the sound of birds, and the warmth of her parents' love. She imagined herself running through those fields again, laughing freely with her friends and feeling the sun on her face. These memories became her secret strength, a way to survive the pain and fear that surrounded her. She understood that while her body was trapped, her thoughts could remain free, and in those thoughts she could still be herself. Over time, she began to notice patterns in her captor's behavior. She realized that not everyone treated her the same way. Some were more patient, some harsher, and some seemed almost indifferent. She learned to adjust her behavior, to speak when necessary, and to stay quiet when danger was near. She learned to read the moods of those around her, understanding when to act and when to wait. Each day was a careful balancing act, a delicate dance between obedience and survival. She became more aware of her surroundings and more careful in her actions, understanding that every choice could have consequences. Loneliness was one of the hardest challenges she faced. She missed her family deeply, the comfort of her mother's voice, the reassurance of her father's presence, and the laughter of her friends. At night, when the world was quiet, she would often cry silently, holding herself close and wishing she could return to the village. The loneliness was heavy, pressing on her heart, and yet it also strengthened her determination. She promised herself that she would not let this place define her, that she would survive and one day find freedom again. That promise became a lifeline, a reason to endure each day no matter how difficult. One day, she noticed a small act of bravery in another girl who was slightly older. The girl had found a way to secretly share small comforts with the others, like extra food or a kind word when no one was looking. Watching her, the girl learned that even in the darkest circumstances, courage and compassion could exist. She began to look for small ways to help herself and others, understanding that acts of kindness, even when hidden, could make a difference. This small sense of community, these shared moments of support, became a quiet source of strength for her. She also discovered the power of learning and observation. While she could not attend a school, she watched, listened, and remembered. She noticed how people interacted, how they solved problems, and how they managed to survive each day. Her mind became a tool for survival, helping her understand the rules of this new world and teaching her how to navigate it. She realized that knowledge was not just something learned from books. It was also learned from life, from observation, and from careful attention. Each day added to her understanding, and each lesson she learned helped her feel a little more in control. Fear remained a constant companion. She was aware that one wrong move could bring punishment, and the adults around her often reminded her of the consequences of disobedience. Yet, she refused to let fear completely dominate her life. Instead, she learned to use it as a guide, a way to understand her environment and make better choices. She became careful, thoughtful, and strategic in her actions. Her fear, while never gone, became a tool for survival, helping her stay alive and find small moments of safety in a world that often felt unsafe. Her dreams also became a place of refuge. At night, she would imagine a life where she was free, where she could walk without fear, laugh without restraint, and make her own choices. She imagined herself returning to her village, feeling the grass beneath her feet and the sun on her face. These dreams gave her a sense of hope and a reason to continue. They reminded her that the world outside still existed, that a life of freedom and happiness was possible, and that she could survive this dark time. Each dream strengthened her spirit and renewed her determination to endure. Despite the harsh reality, she began to notice the resilience within herself. She realized that she could endure more than she had ever imagined, that her spirit could remain unbroken even when her body was confined. Each day, she grew stronger, more aware, and more determined. She learned to face her fears, to protect herself, and to hold on to hope even when the world seemed determined to crush it. Her inner strength became her greatest ally, a silent force that guided her through the darkest moments. She also began to understand the importance of small victories. Simple things, like finding a quiet moment to rest, completing a task without being scolded, or sharing a kind word with someone else, became sources of pride and hope. Each small success reminded her that she still had control over some part of her life, no matter how limited it seemed. These moments built her confidence and helped her remember that she was still human, still capable of feeling, thinking, and acting. Over time, she noticed that even in captivity, people could change, grow, and act with kindness. She observed moments of compassion between those around her, realizing that the human spirit could endure and express goodness even in difficult circumstances. She learned to recognize these moments and hold on to them, using them as examples of hope and reminders that the world could still contain goodness. These small lessons became part of her survival, teaching her that even in darkness, light could be found. She also learned patience. She understood that rushing, fighting, or acting impulsively could bring danger. Instead, she began to wait for opportunities, to watch and listen, and to act carefully when the moment was right. Patience became a skill of survival, teaching her that endurance and careful observation were as important as courage. It was a slow, often painful process, but it helped her develop a sense of control in a world where so much felt beyond her reach. Even amidst the fear, sadness, and isolation, she began to discover a small sense of self-worth. She realized that the cruelty of others could not take away the value of her thoughts, feelings, and dreams. She began to see herself as more than just a victim, understanding that she had the strength to endure, the intelligence to survive, and the courage to hope. This realization, quiet and steady, became a powerful force within her, helping her to face each day with resilience and a growing sense of dignity. By the end of those first months, she had learned many lessons about life, survival, and human nature. She understood that while the world could be cruel, it also contained moments of kindness and compassion. She recognized that hope, patience, and inner strength were her most valuable tools. She had discovered resilience she never knew she possessed, and she had learned that even in the darkest circumstances, the human spirit could endure. Though the pain of captivity never fully left her, she had begun to find ways to survive, to hold on to hope, and to protect her inner self from being completely broken. She had learned to balance fear with courage, despair with hope, and confinement with the freedom of her mind. Each day became a careful negotiation between survival and humanity, a lesson in endurance that would shape her for the years to come. Even in that harsh place, she began to understand that her story was not yet over. She could still dream, still hope, and still imagine a life beyond the walls that trapped her. That spark, small but unyielding, became the foundation of her resilience. It reminded her that the world outside still existed, that freedom was possible, and that one day she could reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. In those months, she discovered the quiet power of her own spirit. Though she was trapped, her thoughts, dreams, and inner strength remained free. She realized that no one could take away her dignity, her hope, or her courage unless she allowed them to. And so, she held onto that quiet power, nurturing it, protecting it, and using it to face each day with as much bravery as she could muster. Though her childhood had been stolen, she began to learn that survival was not just about enduring the cruelty of others. It was about holding on to herself, her thoughts, her memories, and her dreams. Each day, she became stronger, more aware, and more prepared for the moment when she would have the chance to reclaim her freedom. That moment, though distant, remained her guiding light, a promise of hope that carried her through even the darkest hours. Months passed in the harsh world she had been forced into, and though she had learned to survive, her heart longed for more than just endurance. She had begun to understand the rules of her captivity, learned how to avoid punishment, and discovered small ways to hold onto her inner self. Yet, despite all her courage and patience, she often felt a quiet emptiness, a longing for something she could not name. She had survived the cruelty of the outside world, but now she longed for kindness, for understanding, and for someone to see her as more than just a victim. One day, a man arrived who would change the course of her life. He was different from anyone she had ever met. His presence was calm and his voice gentle. Unlike the others, he spoke to her as if she were a person, not an object. He asked her simple questions about her dreams and her thoughts, listened when she answered, and never scolded or criticized her. At first, she was cautious. She had been betrayed before, and the memory of that betrayal made her wary. Her heart urged her to trust, but her mind reminded her to be careful. Still, she could not help but notice a strange feeling of relief in his presence, a feeling she had not experienced in a long time. He did not try to rush her or force her into anything. Instead, he offered small gestures of care. He would bring her something to eat when she was hungry, help her find a quiet place to rest, or simply smile and offer a word of encouragement. These acts, though simple, were revolutionary to her. For the first time in her life since leaving her village, she felt seen and valued. She realized that kindness could exist even in a world that had seemed entirely cruel. Slowly, she began to lower the walls she had built around herself. Trust did not come easily. She had learned the hard way that people could deceive and harm those who trusted them. Memories of her journey from the village and the harsh months of captivity haunted her. She remembered the excitement of leaving home, the promises made by a stranger, and the terrifying realization that she had been betrayed. Those memories made her cautious, and she often kept her distance, careful not to reveal too much of herself too soon. Yet the man's patience and gentle demeanor gradually encouraged her to speak, to share thoughts she had kept hidden for so long. As days turned into weeks, their bond began to grow. He asked her about her life in the village, her family, and the dreams she had once held. She spoke hesitantly at first, unsure if it was safe, but soon found comfort in the way he listened. He did not judge her, did not criticize her past, and did not dismiss her feelings. Instead, he validated them, showing her that her experiences mattered and that her voice had value. For someone who had been treated as powerless for so long, this was a profound experience. In his presence, she began to feel emotions she had long suppressed. She felt hope, curiosity, and even a sense of joy. She realized that it was possible to feel safe, respected, and cared for. These feelings were unfamiliar and almost frightening because they were so different from what she had known. Yet they were also comforting, reminding her that the world could contain goodness and compassion, even after everything she had endured. He also encouraged her to think about her own strengths and potential. He asked questions that made her reflect on her abilities, her creativity, and her intelligence. For the first time in a long while, she realized that she had skills and talents that were valuable. She began to see herself not just as someone who had suffered, but as someone capable of growth, learning, and achievement. This realization was empowering, and it gave her the courage to imagine a life beyond her current circumstances. With his support, she slowly began to take small steps toward regaining control over her life. She learned to make choices, even in small matters, and began to understand that her decisions mattered. The sense of control she had been denied for so long was intoxicating, and she treasured it. Even choosing what to eat, when to rest, or how to spend a quiet moment became acts of reclaiming her identity. Each small choice strengthened her confidence and helped her realize that she was no longer entirely powerless. Despite the growing bond, she remained cautious. Trust, once broken, could not be repaired overnight. She often questioned his intentions, wondering if this was another deception. Yet, each time she tested him with a question or a small act, he responded with patience and consistency. His actions matched his words, and gradually her skepticism gave way to cautious trust. She learned that trust was not about ignoring past pain, but about allowing someone to prove themselves over time. Through their interactions, she also began to understand the importance of emotional support. She had survived through physical endurance and mental resilience, but she had never experienced the kind of encouragement that came from someone who truly cared. This support was transformative. It helped her face her fears more calmly, make decisions with confidence, and believe that she could endure the challenges ahead. She discovered that kindness and patience could be as powerful as strength and intelligence in helping someone heal. The man also shared stories of hope and resilience. He spoke of people who had overcome difficulties, of lives that had been transformed by perseverance and support. These stories resonated deeply with her. They reminded her that suffering did not have to define a person, and that the future could hold possibilities she had not yet imagined. With each story, her dreams began to return, quiet at first, but growing stronger with every passing day. She began to imagine a life where she could be free, respected, and happy again. One of the most important lessons she learned from him was the value of self-respect. He treated her with dignity, never allowing her to feel less than human. He taught her that she deserved respect not because of anything she had done, but simply because she was a person. This lesson was revolutionary to her. In the months she had been captive, she had been treated as worthless, and learning that she was valuable in herself was life-changing. Slowly, she began to carry herself differently, to speak with more confidence, and to feel pride in her own identity. With his guidance, she also began to heal emotionally. The fear and sadness that had dominated her thoughts began to ease, replaced by a sense of safety and comfort. She learned to express her feelings, to acknowledge her pain, and to celebrate small joys. Emotional healing was not instantaneous. It was a gradual process, with setbacks and challenges along the way. Yet, each step forward brought her closer to a sense of wholeness she had not felt in years. She also learned that it was possible to hope again. For so long, hope had seemed dangerous, a reminder of the life she had lost. But with his encouragement, she began to imagine a future where she could live freely, make choices, and pursue her dreams. This hope was fragile, but it was real, and it gave her strength to face each day with renewed determination. She began to see that her past suffering did not have to dictate her future, and that she had the power to shape her own life. Their relationship grew slowly, built on trust, patience, and respect. He never rushed her, never demanded anything from her, and never treated her as less than a person. Instead, he offered guidance, support, and kindness, allowing her to regain confidence in herself and in others. She began to see him not just as a source of support, but as someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. This realization brought both comfort and hope, helping her imagine a life where she could feel safe and valued again. During this time, she also began to notice the small joys of life again. She found pleasure in simple things: a quiet walk, a good meal, a conversation with someone who listened. These small moments reminded her that life could contain happiness even after suffering. They became symbols of the life she could reclaim, small steps toward a future filled with freedom, respect, and dignity. Through his support, she also began to regain her sense of identity. For so long, she had been treated as an object, her individuality ignored or dismissed. Now she was encouraged to think for herself, express her thoughts, and make decisions. This restoration of identity was empowering. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstances, but as a person capable of thought, feeling, and action. Each day, she grew more confident in who she was and in the life she could build for herself. She also learned to forgive herself for the past. She realized that the suffering she endured was not her fault, and that she had done nothing wrong in trusting others or dreaming of a better life. This understanding helped lift a burden she had carried for months. By forgiving herself, she could focus on the present and the future, building a life rooted in hope, dignity, and resilience. By the end of this period, she had undergone a profound transformation. She had learned to trust again, to hope again, and to believe in her own worth. The man's kindness and patience had shown her that it was possible to feel safe, valued, and respected. She began to see a future where she could live freely, make choices, and pursue her dreams without fear. This transformation was not just emotional, it was spiritual, giving her the strength to reclaim her life and her identity. Though the scars of her past remained, they no longer defined her. She had learned that her experiences had shaped her resilience, her courage, and her capacity for hope. She began to understand that the world could be cruel, but it could also contain kindness, compassion, and love. With this understanding, she felt prepared to face the next chapters of her life, ready to embrace healing, growth, and the possibility of happiness. In those months, she realized that true transformation comes not from escaping hardship alone, but from finding someone who sees your humanity, believes in your worth, and supports your growth. The man had become more than a guide or protector. He had become a symbol of hope, trust, and compassion. Through his presence, she learned that even in a world filled with cruelty, it was possible to feel safe, respected, and loved again. As she looked toward the future, she felt a quiet but steady confidence. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, but she also knew that she had the strength, resilience, and support to face them. For the first time since leaving her village, she felt a sense of possibility, a belief that life could be more than survival, that it could be filled with respect, dignity, and even joy. That belief became the foundation for her next steps, guiding her toward healing, freedom, and a life where she could truly thrive. After months of fear, suffering, and cautious trust, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. With the man's guidance and care, she started to feel emotions she had long buried: hope, courage, and even joy. Every small step toward healing felt miraculous to her. Simple things, like waking up without fear, eating a meal without anxiety, or having a conversation where she felt truly listened to, became victories in a world that had once tried to crush her spirit. She began to see that life could be more than survival. It could be lived with dignity and self-respect. She started by discovering her own strengths. For so long, she had been treated as powerless, stripped of identity, and told she was worth nothing. Now she was encouraged to think, to speak, and to make decisions for herself. Even the smallest choices, like deciding how to spend her day or what to wear, became empowering. Each decision reminded her that she still had control over her life, that her thoughts and feelings mattered, and that she could shape her own destiny. Slowly, a sense of confidence began to grow inside her, replacing the fear and doubt that had dominated her life for so long. The man continued to support her, offering guidance without pressure and encouragement without judgment. He taught her that mistakes were part of learning, and that she could grow stronger from them rather than be punished. For the first time, she understood that kindness and patience could create real change. She began to believe in her own abilities, realizing that she could achieve more than she had ever imagined. Each day, she felt a little freer, a little stronger, and a little more capable of facing the world. She also began to rebuild her emotional resilience. The months of captivity had left deep scars, and it took time to confront the pain she had endured. She remembered the loneliness, the fear, and the moments when she had felt completely helpless. But with his support, she learned to acknowledge these feelings without letting them define her. She cried when she needed to, shared her fears when she could, and celebrated small victories along the way. Emotional healing was slow, but each step brought her closer to a sense of wholeness she had not felt in years. In addition to emotional recovery, she began to experience small freedoms that she had never known. Walking outside without fear, choosing her own meals, or simply enjoying quiet moments of solitude became precious treasures. These moments reminded her of life in her village, of the simple joys she had once taken for granted. She realized that freedom was not just a physical state, it was also a feeling of safety, dignity, and choice. Each new experience of freedom helped her reclaim a piece of herself that had been lost. Learning became an important part of her recovery. Though she had missed years of formal education, she began to explore her curiosity again. She read books, asked questions, and absorbed knowledge eagerly. The man encouraged her learning, helping her find ways to expand her mind and regain skills she had missed. Education became a source of empowerment, giving her confidence in her abilities and opening her imagination to the possibilities of a future that was once unimaginable. She realized that knowledge could be a tool for freedom, a way to rebuild her life on her own terms. Trust, once a fragile and uncertain feeling, continued to grow. She began to see that not all people sought to harm or exploit her. Through his consistent kindness, the man demonstrated that genuine care existed, and slowly she allowed herself to rely on him for support. This trust was not blind. It was earned through patience, actions, and respect. She learned that trust could be rebuilt even after betrayal, and that relationships based on respect and understanding could help heal deep wounds. Her self-esteem and sense of worth also began to grow. She realized that she deserved kindness, respect, and love simply because she was human. The months of mistreatment had taught her to doubt herself, but now she began to recognize her own value. She took pride in small accomplishments, like completing a task or learning something new, and celebrated her progress quietly. She started to carry herself differently, speak with more confidence, and feel a quiet pride in who she was becoming. This growing self-respect became a cornerstone of her recovery, helping her face challenges with resilience and dignity. During this period, she also began to think about her future. For so long, survival had been her only goal, and her dreams had been put on hold. Now she started to imagine a life where she could pursue her passions, continue learning, and even help others. She thought about the village she had left behind, her parents, and the friends she had known. She hoped one day to reconnect with them, not just as a survivor, but as a person who had grown stronger through her experiences. These visions of the future became a source of motivation, inspiring her to continue healing and reclaiming her life. She also began to recognize the importance of small joys in daily life. She took pleasure in simple acts, feeling the sun on her face, walking through a garden, or enjoying a quiet conversation. These moments reminded her that happiness could exist even after suffering, and that life could contain beauty and peace. She learned to savor these experiences, understanding that they were not trivial but essential for her emotional well-being. Each small joy was a step toward reclaiming the fullness of her life and her sense of humanity. Relationships became another important aspect of her healing. She began to interact more confidently with others, learning that connections based on mutual respect and care could bring support, joy, and understanding. These relationships reinforced her sense of self-worth and reminded her that she was not alone in the world. She began to build a small circle of trust, sharing thoughts, dreams, and moments of support with those she could rely on. This sense of community became a vital part of her recovery, helping her feel connected, valued, and understood. With time, she also began to embrace her own identity. For so long, her individuality had been ignored, her choices restricted, and her voice silenced. Now she was encouraged to express herself, pursue her interests, and make decisions. She explored her talents, hobbies, and creativity, discovering parts of herself that had been hidden. This rediscovery of identity was deeply empowering, giving her a sense of control and agency she had not felt in years. She began to see herself as a person capable of shaping her own life, not just reacting to circumstances. Healing was not without its challenges. There were days when memories of the past returned, when fear or sadness overwhelmed her, and when doubt crept in. But she had learned to face these moments with courage and patience. She reminded herself of her progress, sought support when needed, and used her inner strength to persevere. Each challenge became an opportunity to grow stronger, to build resilience, and to deepen her understanding of herself. She realized that healing was a journey, not a destination, and that each step forward was meaningful. As she grew stronger, she began to consider ways to give back. She realized that her experiences had given her empathy, understanding, and the ability to support others who had suffered. She began to think about helping those in need, sharing her story to inspire hope, and offering kindness to people who were struggling. This desire to help others gave her a new sense of purpose and reminded her that her past pain could be transformed into something positive. She discovered that healing was not only about herself, but also about the impact she could have on the world. Her sense of hope continued to grow. She imagined a future where she could live freely, pursue her dreams, and build meaningful relationships. She dreamed of a life where she could travel, learn, and create, free from fear and oppression. These dreams became a guiding light, helping her navigate difficult days and reminding her that her past did not define her. She understood that the future was hers to shape, and that every choice she made brought her closer to the life she had longed for. She also learned to celebrate her resilience. She had endured hardships that would have broken many, yet she had survived, grown stronger, and found hope again. Each day, she reminded herself of her courage, her perseverance, and her progress. She took pride in the strength she had developed and the lessons she had learned. This self-recognition became a source of confidence and motivation, reinforcing her belief in her ability to face any challenges that lay ahead. By this stage, she had undergone a profound transformation. She had moved from fear and despair to hope, confidence, and emotional strength. She had reclaimed her sense of identity, learned to trust, and discovered the power of kindness and support. She had begun to imagine a life filled with freedom, dignity, and purpose, and she had taken the first steps toward making that vision a reality. Her journey was far from over, but she had already come so far, and she now had the tools, support, and determination to continue growing. She realized that healing was not just about recovering from the past. It was also about embracing the present and planning for the future. She focused on her dreams, her goals, and the possibilities that awaited her. Each day became an opportunity to build a life that was meaningful, fulfilling, and filled with hope. She understood that her past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. She was free to choose her path, guided by her resilience, wisdom, and growing confidence. Through this journey, she discovered the profound impact of genuine care, respect, and patience. The man had shown her that trust, kindness, and encouragement could transform a life. His guidance helped her rediscover her own strength, reclaim her identity, and believe in her own worth. She realized that human connection, when built on understanding and respect, could heal even the deepest wounds. She carried this lesson with her, knowing that she could offer the same kindness and support to others in the future. As she looked ahead, she felt a quiet but powerful sense of hope. She knew that challenges would continue, but she also knew that she had the strength, resilience, and support to face them. She felt ready to embrace life fully, to pursue her dreams, and to build meaningful relationships. The journey of healing had taught her that even in the darkest circumstances, hope, courage, and love could flourish. She had reclaimed her sense of self, discovered her inner strength, and begun to create a life filled with possibility. Time passed, and she gradually moved from healing to a stage where she could imagine a future filled with possibility. The long months of fear, struggle, and cautious trust had given way to courage, resilience, and hope. She had learned to believe in herself, to make choices, and to trust those who treated her with respect. Each day, she felt stronger, more confident, and ready to step into a life that had once seemed impossible. She had survived horrors that could have destroyed her spirit, yet now she began to understand that she could not only survive, but also thrive. With the man's guidance and support, she began to explore opportunities that had been denied to her in the past. Education, which had once been a distant dream, became a real possibility. She began to read more, to write, and to learn about the world outside the walls that had confined her. Every new lesson, every new skill she mastered, became a step toward freedom and self-reliance. The excitement of learning again sparked a joy she had not felt in years. She began to dream of goals she could achieve, dreams that were no longer limited by fear or circumstances. She also began to envision the life she wanted for herself. Freedom was no longer just an idea. It was something she could feel, taste, and work toward every day. She imagined walking in open fields, breathing fresh air, and experiencing the world without fear. She thought about reconnecting with her family, visiting her village, and sharing her story with those who had loved her. Each vision brought motivation and determination. She knew that her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt she could truly shape her own future. Her sense of self-worth had grown tremendously. The months of captivity had once made her feel worthless, but now she understood her true value. She recognized that she deserved respect, kindness, and dignity simply because she existed. This realization transformed the way she carried herself, how she spoke, and how she interacted with others. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstances, but as a person capable of achieving great things. Confidence and pride in her identity became her guiding forces, helping her face challenges with courage and determination. She also began to take small steps toward independence. She learned to make decisions on her own, solve problems, and navigate situations with confidence. Each step toward autonomy reinforced her sense of empowerment. She realized that independence was not just about physical freedom, but about emotional and mental strength. She was no longer dependent on fear to guide her actions. She was guided by her values, knowledge, and growing self-belief. These steps built a foundation for a life where she could live freely and fully. Relationships became another important part of her transformation. The man, who had been a source of trust and care, remained by her side, offering guidance, patience, and support. Their bond deepened, not just as a protector and someone being protected, but as equals who respected and valued each other. His presence taught her that relationships could be built on understanding, kindness, and trust rather than control or fear. Through this relationship, she learned the importance of mutual respect, empathy, and emotional support in building a meaningful life. She also began to reconnect with her past in a positive way. Memories of her village, her family, and her childhood no longer caused only pain. They became reminders of who she was and what she had survived. She thought about the love of her parents, the laughter of her friends, and the small joys of her early life. These memories became fuel for her determination, inspiring her to rebuild her life in a way that honored both her past and her future. She realized that she could carry her past with her, not as a burden, but as a source of strength and wisdom. With growing confidence, she decided to use her experiences to help others. She recognized that her journey, though painful, had given her empathy, understanding, and resilience that could inspire and support those facing hardships. She began to think about ways to share her story, to encourage others who had suffered, and to be a voice for those who could not speak. This sense of purpose gave her life new meaning. She understood that true empowerment was not only about personal growth, but also about contributing positively to the lives of others. She took pride in the small victories that marked her progress. Completing tasks, learning new skills, and making independent decisions all became milestones in her journey. Each achievement reinforced her confidence and reminded her of how far she had come. She realized that growth was a series of steps, each one building upon the last. Celebrating these small victories kept her motivated and helped her maintain a positive outlook, even when challenges arose. Her emotional resilience also continued to strengthen. The moments of fear, sadness, or doubt that occasionally returned no longer controlled her. She had learned to face them with courage, to seek support when needed, and to use her inner strength to persevere. These challenges, rather than breaking her, became opportunities to reinforce her determination and emotional stability. She understood that healing was an ongoing process, and each moment of challenge was a chance to grow stronger. She also embraced the beauty of simple joys. The feeling of sunlight on her face, a gentle breeze, the sound of birds singing, or a quiet conversation with a trusted friend became sources of happiness. She learned to appreciate these small moments, understanding that joy did not have to be grand or extravagant. It could be found in the everyday experiences of life. These moments reminded her that life, even after suffering, could contain beauty, peace, and contentment. Her personal growth was reflected in her ambitions. She began to set long-term goals, thinking about the life she wanted to create. Education, career, travel, and helping others became her aspirations. She understood that these goals were achievable because of the strength, resilience, and skills she had developed. The dreams that had once seemed impossible now felt within reach. She approached them with determination, patience, and the knowledge that she had the power to shape her own destiny. As she continued to grow, she also developed a sense of gratitude. She recognized the importance of the support, kindness, and care she had received, particularly from the man who had believed in her when others had treated her as worthless. Gratitude became a guiding principle, reminding her to value herself, others, and the opportunities before her. This sense of thankfulness reinforced her positive outlook and motivated her to contribute meaningfully to the world around her. She began to share her story in ways that inspired hope. She spoke to others who had faced hardships, offering encouragement, support, and guidance. Her words carried the weight of experience, empathy, and resilience. People were drawn to her courage and determination, finding inspiration in her ability to overcome adversity. She discovered that her past, though painful, could be transformed into a tool for empowerment, for herself and for others. Her sense of purpose strengthened her sense of identity. She no longer saw herself solely as a survivor of hardship, but as a person with agency, ambition, and the ability to make a difference. This identity allowed her to face the world with confidence, to pursue her dreams boldly, and to help others along the way. She realized that her life had meaning beyond survival, and that she could create a future filled with dignity, respect, and fulfillment. With time, she began to experience the fullness of freedom. It was no longer just the absence of fear or captivity. It was the presence of choice, self-respect, and empowerment. She could decide how to live, whom to trust, and what goals to pursue. She could express herself freely, explore her talents, and nurture relationships built on mutual respect and care. Freedom became a feeling, a state of mind, and a reality she could embrace fully. Her bond with the man remained a source of strength and inspiration. Their relationship had evolved into one based on trust, respect, and mutual care. He had shown her what it meant to be valued, supported, and treated with dignity. Through their interactions, she learned that love and trust could heal deep wounds and transform lives. This understanding became a foundation for all her relationships and reinforced her belief in the goodness that could exist in the world. She also recognized the power of resilience and determination. The hardships she had faced had tested her in ways few could imagine, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. Each challenge she had overcome became a reminder of her strength and a source of confidence for the future. She understood that resilience was not just about surviving difficulties, but about growing through them, learning from them, and using them to build a better life. Her journey was now focused on building a life of purpose, dignity, and fulfillment. She pursued education, developed skills, nurtured relationships, and explored opportunities for personal and professional growth. She remained committed to helping others, using her experiences to inspire, support, and empower those facing hardships. She had transformed her pain into strength, her suffering into wisdom, and her past into a source of hope for the future. As she looked ahead, she felt a sense of empowerment she had never known. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she also knew that she had the tools, resilience, and support to face them. She had reclaimed her identity, rediscovered her worth, and built a foundation for a life filled with dignity and purpose. Her past no longer defined her. It had shaped her into someone capable, strong, and inspiring. Ultimately, she realized that true triumph was not just about escaping hardship, but about embracing life fully, with courage, hope, and determination. She had learned to trust again, to hope again, and to believe in herself. She had found freedom, dignity, and empowerment, and she had discovered the joy of living a life guided by purpose and compassion. Her journey, though marked by pain, had become a story of resilience, transformation, and triumph. Through her experiences, she became a symbol of hope for others. Her story demonstrated that even in the darkest circumstances, the human spirit could endure, heal, and flourish. She showed that kindness, trust, and support could transform lives, and that resilience, courage, and hope could overcome even the most challenging obstacles. She had been sold like an object, yet she had reclaimed her humanity, her dignity, and her dreams. She had emerged not just as a survivor, but as a queen in her own right, strong, empowered, and ready to embrace the life she had always deserved.